Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Chris Legaspi, and today we're going to continue with the How to See Shapes series, and today's episode will be on the hands. In the previous lesson, we talked about hair shapes, value shapes, clothing and fabric, figures, so you definitely want to review all of those. Now, we're not going to actually talk about how to draw hands. It's going to be mostly focused on observation and what to do with the shapes that you see and define. And before we begin, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to my free Insiders Club. Insiders Club members get first access to these weekly live streams, and you also get access to other live events, and you get discounts on courses and programs, along with access to free lessons and other free content available only to subscribers. So all you have to do is go to www.drawwithchris.com, and there you can enter your email and you'll be good to go. In this episode, we're going to start by talking about the tools that we're going to use and review some of the tools. A lot of them, we're going to have a lot of overlaps. Then we're going to demonstrate the process of how to see the shapes and hands, and then do a couple of demonstrations and some homework and ways to improve. Okay, so let's quickly talk about tools. Now, a lot of the tools we're going to talk about mentioned in previous videos. I would specifically review the very first video in this series, which is how to see shapes for the figure. I'm sorry, it's video number 2, lesson 2, how to see shapes for the figure. So that's all. They're all on my YouTube channel for free, so you can watch that. But the tools are all there. We're going to use corners, straights, negative space, even some value shapes if needed, and extremities, which is really what I want to focus on this week. Is probably the primary tool we're going to be using are extremities. And what are extremities? Those are the uppermost, lowermost, right and left. They are really the boundaries of any shape or object. And if we look at this image here, this is a Barg plate, Charles Barg drawing book. And you can see the beautiful contour or shape drawing of this hand. I'm sure it's a drawing of a plaster cast of a hand, of a sculpture hand, but you can see all the same principles. We got corners, right? Corners, any direction changes a corner. We got nice, beautiful straights. And more importantly, we have extremities. So the uppermost is here, the leftmost is here, the rightmost is this pinky. The lower is probably the tip of this middle finger, and on the left, a little bit to its left, we have one there. So these 4 points are the extremities of this object, of the hand as a whole, but remember each little section has extremities too. So we have one here, have one here. But let's say the wrist has its own, has leftmost here, rightmost here. The lower part of the wrist is here, right where it meets the palm. The palm has its own sit. The palm ends its extremities at the knuckle, the base of the knuckles. The thumb, it's its own thing, right? The meat of the thumb has an extremity, a nice simplified straight. Same with each finger has an extremity, lower, upper, left and right of each finger, and each group of fingers. So remember, we want to think of the whole object as a whole, see the whole shape, which is called the contour, the silhouette, right? Contour is king. And then each individual section, each individual piece, individual part also has its own extremities. And extremities are useful, especially when drawing very complex things like a hand or a figure, because the extremities allow us to define the boundary of an object or form in a two-dimensional geometric sense. And the fancy art school term for this is called envelope. Envelope, just like a envelope, which is a rectangular piece of paper that you put in a letter, right? A letter could be handwritten, it could have complex handwriting and a complex message. So in essence, a literal envelope, the paper envelope, is a simplified, right? Is a little simplified shape, and inside it goes something complex, right? Writing, maybe a drawing, right? Maybe you can do hyper realistic bark drawing and put it in an envelope, send it to your friend or a gallery or something like that. So anyway, envelope is a simplified shape that defines the extremities or the boundaries of any object or form. And here we have on this image, we have on this page, we have two diagrams from the Charles Bark book. And if you look at the very bottom, you can clearly see on this hand on the left, you can clearly see the beautiful, simple graphic shape, which is the envelope. And this envelope is made up of the extremities. So that's the extremity of the wrist. This is the extremity of the uppermost part of the fingers, the lower extremity of the finger, lower right, the lower left extremity of the finger, and the extremity of the finger and palm intersection, and then the wrist as the extremity. So you can see it creates a beautiful envelope. And that's what we want for hands, right? Notice if you look at the top, the real hands have complex fingers and beautiful detail and wrinkles and knuckles and things. But we don't start there. We don't start there. We first have to train our eye to see the outer boundaries, the extremities, and then define it in our drawing. And then we can move up to like phase two in the middle and start to add even more secondary shapes, right? In this case, the wrist, the palm, the fingers. This drawing on the right is a foot, but if you look at the image on the top, it's clearly a beautiful representation of the foot, but it's a simple graphic representation, also known as an envelope. So envelope is going to be the biggest tool that we use when it comes to drawing hands. Okay, let's quickly go over the process. So I have a very simplified 5-step process that I use to begin a drawing of a hand or begin a complex drawing of a hand. So step one, and they're not any particular order, except probably step one, that's the most important, which is, again, the envelope, the outer boundary, the contour. Contour is king. Step two is what I call fist and gloves, and we'll go over these in detail. Step three is define the thumb. Step four is to call out the fingers, define the fingers, or in this case, suggest the fingers. And then finally, the last step is to refine your proportions, refine your shapes, and I'll talk about some tools that I use for that. Now, this page here, you can see, again, a series of bark drawings. These two on the right, we already looked at. This one on the left also has a beautiful representation of the envelope. You can see a nice representation of that. Right, leftmost, rightmost, uppermost, lowermost, right, outer extremity of the palm, lower extremity of the palm. And then here you can see how it started as it's very simple, more simplified envelope, but then he later added the cut, the finger and the knife, and also a negative space cut. So that's more of a using the negative space, but you can just clearly see the use of the envelope and see these on the right. So it's another example of enveloping. Okay, step two is what I call fists and gloves. Fists and gloves. Fist is, when you close your hand, you make a fist, and glove is glove. Really, to me, when I look at a hand, and I think this is good practice to train your eye, when I look at a hand, I literally don't see fingers. I don't see any fingers at all. In fact, I look at the fingers, very last. When I do a quick scan of a hand that I want to draw, or if I'm inventing a hand, I don't start by drawing the finger, right? I start with the outer boundary, the envelope. But really, when it comes to more complex hands, and eventually when you have to add fingers, what I look for is fists and gloves. Fists and gloves, meaning a fist is when it's probably the easiest hand to draw. Is basically your hand closed, looks like a big ball, right? Or big curved, round, or squarish ball. And a glove, let's say like a simplified glove, like an oven mitt, where you don't have any fingers, is basically like an envelope, like this image on the right. You can say that that's sort of a glove. And really all these do is they group fingers. And that's really the important thing. That's what I mean by fists and gloves. When I look at a hand, you want to see is how much can I group the individual fingers? Number one, obviously, fingers are extremely complex, right? And there are times when we do have to draw individual fingers, no doubt. But in general, when you can group the hands and group the fingers, you want to do that. That's a good practice, and it's a good way to train your eye. So again, we look at this example on the left. This, if we look at the bottom, the finished drawing, right? We know this is a drawing of a plaster cast, so it's not drawing, but it's a realistic drawing. We could all agree it's detailed and beautiful and gorgeous. And look at the beautiful finger detail, right? Each finger, even the thumb, has beautiful detail. But that's not how the drawing started, and that's not how we want to start to look at a hand, right? We want to see, okay, it's pretty much the closed hand. It's a hand wrapping around like a knife or grabbing something that's kind of like a knife or a handle. So it's pretty much a closed hand, which is pretty much a fist. So you can see that the artist here started with pretty much a fist. You could argue that it's also a glove, right? It's just basically the back fingers grouped together. That's how you begin. And then, then you could call out the fingers, which we'll talk about next. And we look on the right here. Again, the bottom we saw as an example of the envelope, but that's also if you look at just the fingers, that's also a glove, right? It's pretty much an oven mitt. An oven mitt is a glove with no fingers that you put in a hot oven. And we look at the second iteration of the drawing, the second more refined. Even though there are individual fingers, look how the artist grouped as many fingers as he could, 3. He grouped 3 fingers, so it's basically a glove with a little bit of a pinky. No, it's basically a glove. So we got a fist and a glove, and you can see that Charles Barg also starts this way to get the realism. Even though you want to get the ultra realism, we got to start with really clean and simple shape. And fist and glove is a great it's a great way to start to look at fingers. And the next step, once you draw the glove, is to define the thumb. Why the thumb? Well, the thumb is the biggest finger, and the thumb has a big meaty chunk. Actually, it's actually a big part of your palm. It makes up quite a big mass of your palm. So the thumb has a big, large mass that's interconnected with your palm. And the thumb, it's one of the fingers that makes a human hand unique. If I were to draw this, you're like, okay, what is that? I'm not sure. Looks like a oven mitt or a sock puppet. But the moment I do this, you go, oh, okay. Oh, that's a hand, right? It's all because of the thumb. So calling out the thumb gives us a really strong, quick visual read. And here we have an example by, again, Charles Barg. And notice the initial lay-in drawing is basically an envelope. It's only really one finger clearly visible, but he called out the thumb, and rightfully so, especially for this pose. Thumb is very important. Another example from the Charles Barg book. You can see on the left how the drawing started as a crisp and clean shape-based drawing. And notice that all the fingers are gloved or grouped together. Remember, look for fists and gloves. And the only one that gets really called out to make it feel like a hand is the thumb. So beautiful example of grouping every finger, but really calling out the thumb first and foremost to establish the fact that it is a hand. Okay, once you define your thumb, the next obvious thing is the fingers. So fingers, obviously, we need them to fully communicate the hand, especially when the fingers are splayed out or spread out, right? We can't possibly glove or group all the fingers if they're all splayed out, but we do need to draw fingers. And what I would suggest and what I do in my process is to first suggest finger. And there's a couple of ways to do this. One is with drawing good gloves first, right? Grouping as many as you can, and then adding notes or accents that show overlaps and the boundary of each finger, and also the negative space. So let's look at this example again by Barg. On the left, you have a really nice grouping here of the two middle fingers. And notice that once you have them grouped, you can just simply indicate the boundary in between, right? The boundary in between the finger that's closer to the viewer, right? It's overlapping the other hand, so we need to define that boundary, and then just simply cut out the negative space. You see that? Cut that negative space out, and then boom, now you have a crisp and clean suggestion of two fingers, really. That's the key at the beginning, and then this finger obviously has a nice rectangular shape, but he adds little nuances of detail. So those are suggestions of joints. See that? That's a suggestion. That's not a drawing of a joint. That's a suggestion. That's where we want to start. Same with the pinky hand, right? Get its outer boundary first, its contour, its shape, and then boom, suggest the finger or the knuckle. And we'll go through more examples of this process in the demonstration, but I just want to go through this quickly. So finally, step 5, refine shapes and proportion. Refine the shapes. Obviously, once you have your hand built, once you have the shape, once you have your gloves and your fist, call out your thumb, call out the fingers that need to be called out. Now, we'll just refine our work. You know, we want the naturalism, so our hands have to follow some proportional laws or look or rules. This image here is from Andrew Loomis' book, Head and Hands. Comment below if you have this book. It's a wonderful book. And this plate is called Proportion of the Hand. The thing I want to call out is the line of the knuckles. When I gauge the proportion of my hand, I'm always looking for the line of the knuckles, specifically the first knuckles, the large knuckles on top of your palm, and then the central knuckle, and then the final knuckle. So they do follow this kind of arched curve, as you can see. I think we could all, anyone who's ever drawn a hand has noticed this or has used this rule. So that's, for me, even like on the inside of this palm here, the diagram on the lower left, you can see that the contour of your palm, the outer boundary of your palm also follows that curve. Same with the fingertips and the inside of the knuckles, inside of the joints, that line that forms your finger joints also flow around this arc, this curve. Another example by Charles Barg. You can see that beautiful hand. And notice here you can see the artist actually literally drew out the curve of the knuckle, but it's drawn in straight lines. You guys see that? I'll do it in pink here. See that? It's drawn as a straight, but it can easily be curved. Anything that can be made straight can be made curved. Same with this. Same with the top knuckle. All follows a beautiful flow of that curve. So that's a real simple way to align the knuckles and help you get better proportion. Let's quickly look at some examples. And I cannot talk about hands, teach a class on hands without bringing up J.C. Leyendecker. In my humble opinion, he's arguably the greatest hands of all time. In my opinion, I could be wrong, but I just marvel at the glory of his hands. You know, when I first um, saw these images like underpaintings, I've seen Leyendeckers. I'm sure we all have. I've seen Leyendeckers finished paintings, and they're absolutely stunning, right? I think we all agree. They're world, historically great illustrations and paintings. But when I first saw these like sketches, I believe it was like 10 years ago. And at the time I was a concept artist. I was working in video games as a concept artist. And I remember when I saw these hands, I think the first thought that popped in my mind was like, I want to paint just like that. I thought they were those amazing things because even as a concept artist working in digital, I struggled to get the hands to look right, at least tonally, to make them look round and have beautiful form. So I did lots of, little digital studies of Leyendecker hands. You can do a quick search on Google, Leyendecker hand studies. You might see that little JPEG. I wrote a blog post about it a long time ago. But let's take a look at the great Leyendecker here. Let me zoom in. Let's look at the left. Remember the idea of uh, contour. You can clearly see in the envelope, clearly see, okay, the great master himself, who doesn't hide his shapes and his design. You can clearly see he used the glove, he used the envelope. You can clearly see how he called out the thumb. You can clearly see how he used the glove to group these two fingers. And then you can clearly see the beautiful negative space and individual calling out of fingers as needed. This is more of a splayed hand. So just absolutely stunning work. You can see Leyendecker on the upper right here. There's literally right below it, there's literally a drawing of a glove. But this is a glove with the fingers. But let's look at this. You can clearly see, is there an envelope? Is there clear extremities? Yep. Corner, 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 lower corner of the palm. This little finger is a call out. You can clearly see the fist in use, right? Grouped all of these together, individually calling out once you have the fist established, individually calling out a finger, and then suggesting detail. Notice here, I'm going to zoom in real quick. Notice the finger detail here and here to some extent, and also here on the glove hand. All three of these, right? You may look at that and go, oh, there's 3 individual fingers. They're absolutely gorgeous, and I would agree. But what the master does is the master can do the most with the least. So he really didn't render or over detail this. He just starts by beautifully suggesting fingers with a little bit of an accent. You see that? That little accent, boop, boop. That's all it took. Same here on this hand on lower left, boom, boom. That little accent, it's all it took. Here, accent, accent, accent. Very simple, clean accent right there, boom. This little overlap. That's all it takes. A little bit of negative space. That's all it takes. Suggest. Let's look at the glove hand. Suggestion, 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 highlight, suggestion. So it's not about even the bottom finger, little shadow shape, suggestion, little cast shadow here. So train your eye to not see individual fingers. And when it comes to the fingers, work like the great master Leyendecker. They all do, sergeants as well. They suggest. They don't overwork with details and over labor. Fingers are very complex details, so we want to start suggesting. All right, so let's do some demonstrations. Here we have a beautiful some of the hands I'm going to use are what I call um, poster hands or box cover hands, because they're going to have a lot of weapons, so sword and guns. Oh my God, the gesture is it's all wrong here. Oh my God, it's what happens when you try to talk. That's my excuse. Okay, so gesture, extremities, gesture, extremities. So knuckle, knuckle, middle finger, knuckle, and then fist glove. So I have like it's my little envelope for the front hand. Let's talk about the back hand now. And this is knuckle of the thumb. And thumb to forefinger, and then fist hand. So they're basically both fist hands. Very, very, very fun to draw. This is good. I would consider this easy, right? I always say work your way up, start with an easy pose, easy lighting. Okay, so got my fist hand, got my envelope. Now let's call out the thumb, or call out the thumb, the glove, the fist. So I got some nice fists already. The only thumb I see is obviously on the left hand here. So I'm going to call that out. I'm looking at the extremities of the thumb. I'm not looking remotely at the detail. To me, the thumb is basically any old two-dimensional object that has two-dimensional boundary. Contour is king. So I am just like contour, 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 rounding the curve. Remember, that's the curve of the thumb. Remember, we know how to do that. You got to review. If you missed that, we know how to round the apex of a curve, turn it into a straight. So it's a nice, quick way to block in. And wrap the fingers of this forehand into a glove. Same with this bottom hand. They're basically all kind of gloved. I can call out the forefinger, and with some negative space, boom. Notice I don't draw this front top finger. I just cut out the negative space. So now I've suggested fingers, and then put a little line there. So it separates one finger. The rest are kind of gloved or fisted together, grouped together, basically. And let's see. Line of the knuckle will help me to find the proportion. Calling out the forefinger. So calling out a finger when needed. I called out the forefinger of this front hand. Let me call out the thumb there. Something is not right about this sword handle. Okay, anyway. Now I'm going to suggest the fingers. Boom. Little suggestion there. Cut out the negative space. Boom. Same with these fingers. Cut out the little negative space that makes up the, right? Go from here. I'm basically cut out, cut out, cut out. You guys see that? Cut out, cut out, cut out, and then suggest, suggest. Cut out the negative space, suggest, suggest, just like working with paper cutout. Little knuckle detail, just for fun there. And now I can refine my shape, refine my proportion. And that's really all she wrote there. Now I can add little nuances and bumps. I can add, I always like to define the thumb if it's visible. To me, the thumb is the most important finger, if you think about it. Remember, with the thumb, we can communicate that it's a hand. Without it, it just looks like a glove, basically. And suggesting some knuckle detail using the little underplane shadow of the knuckle there. And that's all I can really do. Maybe add a dark accent there. Proportionally, I feel pretty good. It's probably way off. I can define this even more here. But for a first drawing of the little fist hand, it works pretty well. And sometimes it's nice to suggest fingertips. That way, you know that this hand is the fingers aren't curling under this sword handle. They're they're sitting on top. Okay, so another it's clearly a fist hand, and you can't have a movie poster portfolio without someone holding a gun. Oh, okay, so I'm kind of skipping ahead here. I want to try to draw slowly again. Okay, so extremities, the glove, the envelope. So we have extremity, corner, lower extremity of the palm, follow the line of the fingers, and this finger's out quite a bit here, and then the little gun there. Okay, so I just want to give myself a little bit of detail so I know proportionally where I'm at with this gun, which will come in handy later. Okay, so now we got our envelope, we got our fist, we have our glove, and the thumb. Already defined the thumb. Remember, don't draw a thumb. Well, I mean, do draw the thumb, but don't draw, knuckles, bone, muscle detail. Treat the thumb like its own object, and every object, you know the drill. We treat it the same. Contour first, and then refine second. Suggest details at the very end. Okay, so I got the thumb. Now I have to suggest individual finger. Here, I'm just going to cut out a negative space. Remember, just like Leyendecker did, he basically suggested all his fingers. This is little negative space cut out. And I'm not even going to that's the knuckle there. Not going to worry too much about the fingernail. So I'm going to call out the pinky now. And pinky is just a rectangular thing that has its own boundaries, its own contour, own shape, its own corners, its own straights, its own envelope, if you will. And finally, the trigger finger here. This one I have to call out. Man, that's so wonderful. And now, yeah, feel pretty good about that. Suggested the detail. Let me just draw my nail, suggest knuckles, real subtle suggestion. Remember, just like we saw Barg do, don't draw individual knuckles, suggest. Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. Obviously I need to detail the hand and things, but I think, excuse me, the gun, but the hand looks pretty good to me. Can move on to the next. Okay, this one's a little bit tricky. The fingers are splayed, almost splayed. Splayed means S-P-L-A-Y-E-D. It means hand spread, basically. Your fingers are spread out. It's called splaying. So let's see. I think I'm going to quickly ghost in the object. I like that a lot. I a couple years ago I did I did some poster concepts for a TV series, and it was about two women. It's basically like a one of those girly shows, and I swear I had to do like 25, 30 of these poster concepts, and half of them they were holding glasses, just like cheering each other, drinking wine, chill champagne, this little champagne glass, or having like holding little bits of food. So it was a lot of fun. So what we're doing here absolutely translates into movie poster work, which is kind of why I'm doing this whole series. So step one, shape, contour. Contour is king. So for a contour of a hand, we need to use the envelope first. Look at the extremities, the outer points. Now I'm going to count her nails. They're interesting. So there's a nice little glove, right? I'm going to give myself the line of the knuckle here because now I don't see a thumb, so we have to skip the thumb and call out the fingers. So this knuckle line here helps me to kind of get a rough start on the proportion. Now I'm going to see if I can glove, which I kind of can with the two middle hands. I always try to glove as much as the hand as I can, because remember, just like Leyendecker, we want to suggest, the master suggests detail. The beginner will spend way too many hours on detail. So we want to be like the masters and suggest detail. So I got my glove. I'm going to call out my two outer fingers. Typically when I do a splayed hand, this is a splayed hand. Right. I always try to do something like that. Try to group the middle fingers as best as I can. It just makes life easier for me um, to work. Okay, so I got two middle fingers. I called out the little pinky, keeping in mind the gesture. So that's will help me with the shape. That pinky clearly has a gesture going from this sort of curve, right? It's not that curve, it's out. So I got to keep that in mind. And then so now I got to call out the two middle fingers because they are indeed separate, which is fine. So boundary first, shape first, gesture, shape, or you draw the shape in a gestural way. That's best of both worlds. Um, feel pretty good about that. Check my proportion. So follow the curve of the knuckle. Okay, that feels pretty good. The secondary curve. Let's see. This one goes way inside. So, okay, I feel pretty good about that. Going to, I think she has these acrylic nails, these fake nails, curly nails. So they're really nice. Refine my proportion, refine my shape, suggest the knuckle detail, right? Simple, guys see that? I don't draw, oh, knuckle, oh, bone, oh, fat, oh, wrinkle, oh, vein, oh, fold. Oh, right. I don't do that. We draw the shape, we cut out negative space, and to suggest a knuckle, we do just like what the barg did. Boom and boom. Right? Simple little accent. That's all we need. That's all we need. Of course, a little bit of tone helps, and if we're painting, a little bit of color helps. But that's a nice start. So suggest little knuckle detail, large knuckle of the hand. Um, I'm not even going to mess with this middle one. I could suggest a little knuckle detail there. Suggest it there. This one needs some tone, really. The ring, if we so choose. And finally, let's see if we can refine the palm a little bit, add some meat to it. Beautiful overlaps. This is all figure drawing 101 right here. Overlaps, stretch and pinch, all the stuff that I've been practicing for years. All the stuff that all Steve Huston fans like me practicing for years. Okay, so that's feel pretty good about that. Nice little splayed hand. Obviously, once you add some tone, let's just quickly add some tone. Why not? I use tone to suggest the fingers turning away, really. And if you do a value study after Leyendecker, you can see he does the same thing. The values are very close together, which takes a lot of skill, but it's helpful to just really touch on these with a touch of value, touch of tone to help sell the form, continue your illusion there. Once you add the tone, it starts to flesh out nicely. And finally, we're going to do a little master copy after the great Sargent. This is Spanish dancer, or the dancer in El Jaleo, one of his famous paintings with exquisite hand, absolutely. So let's just quickly let's see what we can learn from the great Sargent. So this hand has a beautiful gesture, so I cannot ignore that. Has a beautiful flow, and I think, we want, even though we're doing shape-based drawing, and um, there there is no um, you cannot error by adding gesture in your drawing. So it's calling out the extremity there, the pinky, the glove hand. Now the forefinger is out, so we can call that out. So essentially this would be the first envelope. If I were to just totally ignore the details, that would be sort of the envelope that I get. Just need that knuckle there so I know where I'm at. Not the knuckle, excuse me, the bone of the wrist. All right. So glove and fist. So not much of a fist, but I can glove or group a bunch of hands. I can group really all three of these three fingers grouped together. The thumb, let's call out the thumb now. So when you do this at home, you want to treat the masterwork like it's a piece of reference, like it's a model in front of you. And the thumb has a beautiful rhythmic connection to the fingers. So that is not by accident. In fact, those could be fingers right here. See that beautiful connection? Boom. Little thing could be the thumb. I'll just say it's the thumb. Why not? And so I got my glove. Let me call out finger. Obviously, the pointing finger is super important. I'm gonna have to do some work to make sure these proportions are right. But I think right now at this stage it's reading well. So let me call out this finger here. Now I could do this just like Leyendecker did by merely cutting out the negative space. See that? This little bit of negative space right here. I'm going to do the same thing. And then suggest these fingers, a little bit of negative space there for that one, little tiny negative space. So I feel pretty good about that. I feel pretty good about my hand so far. Now I got to refine, line up the knuckles for proportion sake. Refine my shape. Refine. Suggest. Detail. Refine this hand. I don't like the shape of that. I think it should be more flowing downward. Yeah, just keep it very graphic and geometric for now. And the finger pointing. Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. It needs some tone, but I'll do that together with the bottom one. Quickly do the bottom hand. So this bottom hand again has absolutely stunning gesture. I see a bit of an S. Bit of an S. I'm looking at the outer contour of the wrist and forearm. And now I'm into the hand, so we got to draw the glove, the oven mitt, the envelope. There's the envelope that I see. There's the wrist. That's the lower boundary where the wrist bends and meets the palm, intersects with the palm. The palm, I have my nice glove. I'm gonna call out my thumb, define the thumb. Okay, so now once I put the thumb in, you're like, okay, it's a hand. He's drawing a hand, right? You see that? Before, I don't know what that is. It looks like a curvy rectangle, but the moment you add a thumb, you're like, oh, it's a hand. That's why we want to give some special care to the thumb. So let's keep our fingers gloved or as grouped as possible. We got that. 3 fingers I can group for now. Now what I'm going to do is call out the pinky. Pinky looks nice to call out. And the pinky is basically just like the palm, like the hand, like the figure, like the head. It's basically a shape. It has outer edges. It has a contour. It has extremities. It has corners. Okay, so we got the pinky shape. Now let's talk about the other fingers. Negative space, glove, and negative space. If we look at the sergeant, he did the exact same thing. I'm going to zoom in a minute here, but negative space and then little accent right there. Little accent right there to call out that finger. Little accent right there. Little accent at the thumb. Little dark accent. He did it in paint. We can also do that in drawing, of course. Yeah, I feel pretty good. I don't really want to add all this knuckle detail on a woman's hand. It'll make it look manly. But for sure, we can add some tone. Let's do that now. Let's add some tone to the top hand first. Just to give it some more meat. And I'm also going to suggest the fingers and the knuckles with a little bit of tone. So we don't have to, draw a hard line on everything to death. We don't want to do that. We have to abandon that at some point, or draw on top of it. Not abandon it, but build on top of it. Excuse me. Yeah, there's a little bit of tone there. Nice. Okay. So it's a nice, quick little study there. Bottom hands, some tone. Suggesting tone at the fingertips, a nice gradient. Suggest fingers moving in light and having a little bit of depth and some volume. It's exactly, if you study Leindecker and do like tonal copies or color studies, you'll see that he used lots of gradients, really. It looks like beautiful rendering, but it's just intelligent use of value control, really. Same with Sargent here, same vein, around the same time period. And that's really all I want to do for now for this one. Again, it's a woman, we can curve, add a little bit of curve, suggest nails, fingernails. We don't want to, render every knuckle. It'll just look so strange. And I'll quickly, just like Sargent did, use these dark accents to suggest fingers. Now, you may think, oh, Chris, he actually drew individual fingers, but I would argue he suggested, and I can show you. We'll zoom in. Okay, when you zoom in, you can see the fingers here. And what I see is, I don't see individual fingers splayed out. I see a glove with beautiful dark accent. See this dark accent? Boom, right there. Dark accent. little dark accent, bigger dark accent. See that in the thumb, dark accent, right? Just like you saw me draw, it's not, oh, palm, thumb, knuckle, detail, oh, palm, knuckle, detail, oh, knuckle, oh. No, it's not that. It's a crisp, sharp envelope, graphic shape, outer shape, right? And then negative space, suggestion, negative space, suggestion, suggestion, negative space, suggestion. That's that's the goal. So that's why you want to do these studies, because then you'll see the tips and tricks from the masters. Now for homework, we can just do a couple barg plates. You could start by doing, barg has some excellent hand plates. We saw a bunch here. I would literally copy the diagram step by step. It'll give you a good understanding of what we talked about here and how to use shape to draw the complex hand. And Barg will help teach you that. Then do a couple of Leyendeckers. Obviously, Leyendecker or Sargent, he's great as well, as we saw. Excellent hands to study. Just do the outer shape study. Maybe take it to this level here, like in the middle. Or you saw me do is add touches of tone to suggest form. And then finally do offhand study. So your left hand, if you're right-handed, and so on, vice versa. Here, this is by Andrew Loomis. The great Loomis is drawing your own hand. That's the name of this diagram. And he drew his left hand. So that's wonderful. That's what I did when I was a kid, and I wanted to draw hands. I drew my hand until I fell asleep. Literally, I would do pages and pages and hundreds in my left hand. It was so much fun, and you'll enjoy it too, especially once you start to apply these, internalize these shape observation practices.